Take a look at his creation first. Home indigenous technology, that being the People's Liberation Army Air Force frontline combat unit since February. The latest self-developed stealth fighter jet continues to improve China's Air Force combat capabilities. And after joining the Air Force in March of last year, the J-20 has been part of many training and military activities. That includes the PLA's 90th anniversary military parade last year. And this jet is a two-engine, single-seat, fifth-generation stealth fighter designed for medium and long-range strike missions. It is now a strategic combat force capable of fighting in all of China's domain. The J-20 made its maiden flight back in 2011. It was shown to the public at the 11th Air Show China in Zhuhai in 2016. And Yang Wei is the chief designer behind this Chinese indigenous jet, the stealth fighter jet. We'll come back to the corridors to listen in to what Yang Wei has to say. Let's first turn to our Professor Fu Jun for some discussions about this year's two sessions. Professor Fu, have you been following the two sessions this year?
Pretty much so.
What do you think is the most agenda of this year's political season?
Well, in spite of all the formalities, I think there is a very significant and substantive institutional change in the governance of China. Now, the head of state of this country, the president of China, used to be a ceremonial position. And with the constitutional amendments, this position has made to be very substantive, powerful position, including the vice president of China. And if you look at the sequencing following which the president make appointments, you see a range of ministers. It's the president of the state that appoint those ministers, including the prime minister. That means the previous governance structure, you have the party, you have the government. Now the party is in very strong control of the government apparatus, and through the making of that ceremonial position substantive. In other words, the president of China is perhaps more powerful than the presidents of the United States in terms of the institutional setup.
But as an institutional change, probably, is in the Constitution of the People's Republic, the leadership of the CPC is enshrined in the Charter. That means the CPC leadership is the basic feature of the Chinese system. That's still say that the party is probably the decision maker of all the things here in China.
That is a constant. A constant means you had that before, now you have it now. The General Secretary of the party will head the standing committee of the Politburo. That party secretary simultaneously will hold the position of the president of the country, as well as serving as the chair of the party's military commission. So the three key positions, the chairman of the military commission, the general secretary of the party, and the head of the state, these all become very substantive and very powerful. You combine all three together.
And another important change is probably the scrapping of term limits for one of the title, that is the head of the state, the president of the People's Republic of China. And that has been caught a lot of attention from around the world. First of all, do you think it is the right time to make this kind of change? And what is the purpose this kind of change is to serve?
Personally, I would sort of see more instrumental rationality. Instrumental rationality is you have an urgent task to accomplish. Remember, it's not the first time for China to amend its constitution. It seems our constitution is more malleable to change than, say, the Constitution of United States.
So you're saying the system has been changing all the time?
Changing
all the time. It is not the first, it will not be the last.
It's a reflection of the belief here. The system need to change according to the change of times. China is a country that is in the business of catching up with the global trends, and specifically if you're looking at its economy. We are in an emerging markets, so the institutional setup is believed to be better, should better serve the urgent task of that. So I take of that is by doing away with the limits, and particularly when you see the vice president of the state sort of is arranged simultaneous with state, and specifically Mr. Wang Qishan will serve, continue to serve, and this is a very powerful signal that as a consequence of previous rounds of reforms, we have to deal with the very thorny problem of corruption, and by having him continue to serve.
But you don't know what kind of portfolio Vice President Wang will be holding.
We still have to watch, and that make that very possible for him sort of to continue to give people a sense of continuation that anti-corruption will be a very strong theme as the country continue to move forward.
And another thing that a lot of people are talking about is this amendment, the constitutional amendment, and also the institutional change, has been endorsed by the NPC deputies with a high majority votes of yes. So this is actually a time for the top leader to seek a pact with the NPC deputies, in general with his people, about the new political arrangement. How do you look at the popular support of such a change?
Certainly, the fact speaks for itself. You look at the votes, it's close to unanimous votes, if I remember correctly, and it's votes of the deputies. And
do they represent?
And how the deputies get selected? Well, China has its own special features. So Westerners may have critical comments, and if they look very carefully, not everything is the same when you compare China with other parts of the world.
So these NPC deputies are represented enough of their constituencies in different parts of
Representation
this
is a matter of degree.
And how much of a degree do you think it is?
In our system, as you mentioned, when you read the constitution of the country, the party is supposed to be in the leading position of the whole country. In other words, in making key appointments of the government, the party continue to exercise its very powerful influences.
So this is why the West have a problem understanding how this comes up. Because the idea of the constitutional amendment come from the CPC, not actually from the NPC. It seems that we have the stealth fighter jet designer speaking.
Internally, we call G20 Weilong, while the citizens and the netizens has given many nicknames to G20. For example, you said the black belt or the others. We like them all. The G20 achievement helped us to realize many goals. The first one is to bring a new generation. Secondly, drive technological development and build a team of talents and boost research development. To bring a new generation jet requires the technological advancement with our own independent design and research. Today, G20 is able to safeguard our national security and the people's interests. The astronauts and aerospace personnel are all very proud of it. The second goal is to lead our technological development, which means we aim to actually cement the strengths of our own force. We hope that our jets could have its own strong capabilities and features, for example, the supersonic feature and the mobility feature, so that it has a long journey and carries as much missiles as possible. So such a carried jet could function in many areas, in many battles, and we have our own trump cards. I think for the astronautics industry, it will have a leapfrog development from catching up with others to leading the way. Have an innovative research and development mechanism requires the best designing conditions and process of designs. In the past years, with J20 and J15 and Kunlun 600 and a myriad of the other independent technological results, we have built our own digital R&D line with the Chinese characteristics. In that way, the cycle of such a jet plane design is shortened with higher qualities. Besides, in terms of the civil and military integration, we have made big strides. For example, the carbon fiber and the super materials are brought by the private companies. So with the different types of jets design, we could actually cultivate a team of talents that would love to contribute to their nations. And a lot of wonderful youngsters have grown to be stronger with their patriotism and their capabilities. They will be the major players of the aerospace industry in the future. As to the direction of our aerospace industry, with technologies like J20, I believe we will have more of such things brought about, and with such series of development, we will improve the entire Air Force's capabilities in fighting, and we will blaze a new trail of actually taking the lead compared to the world's average. We will also bring about a new set of jets that could suit the needs of our nation. I believe in the future, in terms of the mechanization, informatization, and intelligence of the fighter jets, we will have a longer future and make new contributions, which will surprise you pleasantly. All in all, we are always on the way. Thank you.
That's the chief designer of the China's fifth generation stealth fighter jets, the J-20. It seems he's pretty confident about China's technological prowess at this stage, because China can now develop its own stealth fighter jets and also its own carriers. What does this say about the manufacturing capability and the technological advance so far we've made?
What is significant about what it's doing in the front of technology is that we have set up a lot of platforms. It is through those platforms you can continue to climb up the technological ladder globally. Learning technology is not just a matter of reading books. You must have a platform, and you learn things by doing things. You set up a prototype, and once you have that, with that platform, you can continue to improve.
So it's a systematic
layout. So that logic applies to our aircraft carrier. It also the logic also applies to the jet fights. Now, in the case of China, as the Chinese economy continue to integrate with the rest of the world, if you are realistic, you have to have the military to back that up, and that means we have to move beyond the previous concept of a Chinese army being just the ground force to stretch its dimension in the form of a navy and in the form of the air force. This is a critical lesson that China has learned. For us to move forward, we should start by using our comparative advantage, but comparative advantage in the long term need to be changed into competitive advantage. So that logic applies to our business, to our military force as well.
So you are saying that China will be more competitive in all different fields? China
has become increasingly competitive already, but we are sort of in the middle range of the global spectrum.
Okay.
If you only look at its economy, the aggregate amount is number 2, but in terms of GDP per capita, we are actually below world average, edging up to the world average.
And it is climbing steadily. And gradually. Well, let's turn to some other NPC deputies who are about to speak to the press. Well, many of the NPC deputies are actually from the ethnic minority backgrounds. One of the NPC deputies who will show up at the delegates' corridor today is this girl. Well, she is from Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. She is Rikiyamu Metisadi. Well, she has a very famous great-grandfather. Well, the great-grandfather's name is better known as Uncle Korban. Now, he was a well-known Uyghur farmer who lived a poor life before the founding of the People's Republic. And in 1955, he prepared dozens of food, and he tried to ride a donkey to Beijing to meet Chairman Mao to show his appreciation for the improvement of his life. But fellow villagers stopped him. They told him it was impossible to make a donkey walk that far. But he finally met Chairman Mao in 1958. And that relationship between the leaders and the farmer's family from Xinjiang did not just stop there. 50 years later, his great-granddaughter took another ride of a different kind. Rikiyamu rode on the Liaoning, the first aircraft carrier of China. Well, she served in the Navy. And last year, President Xi sent a letter of congratulation to the farmer's family, wishing them good luck. So Rikiyamu said, it was the best New Year present, probably for the whole family and for the area. And during last year's Two session, a village officer from the prefecture where she come from handed President Xi that family photo of Uncle Korban's descendants. Well, that's a little anecdote about the NPC deputy, and she will very soon speak to the press about her story and her great-grandfather's story. But this basically sets a tone of the ethnic minority relations with the Chinese leadership. Okay, already we have the NPC deputies, Rikiyamu, on the line. Let's try to take a listen to what she has to say.
Thank you. With CCTV. Your great-grandfather, Korban, used to write a letter to the General Secretary Xi Jinping. So we are very interested in your life of the children of Korban, and how are you going to carry forward the spirits of your great-grandfather. My great-grandfather used to meet with Chairman Mao, and once again I also meet with General Secretary Mr. Xi Jinping, and I feel very proud. And my families are all leading a very happy life in my hometown. Well, back home, life is becoming better and better, and they strongly feel that the policies of the central government are bringing benefits to our hometown. We still keep the photos of my great-grandfather meeting with Chairman Mao, and also the letters given by General Secretary Xi Jinping, and we will continue to carry forward the spirits of my past generations and measure up to the expectations of the central government in loving the country and loving the people. So the officials and people of Xinjiang are working in unity. So we work together and we assist each other to tackle those difficult problems. We also visit those Han Chinese families and households, and please rest assured, and all the people in Xinjiang will continue to work in unity for a great victory in our country.
You have to bear in mind that when she first, Rikayama, when she first come to the carrier, the Liaoning, she didn't speak Han Chinese. So she had to try to catch up with the Mandarin and then interact with other fellow sailormen. And that pretty much shows how the ethnic minorities have come to become a part of this nation's undertaking. And I was told that she just had a daughter, and hopefully her daughter will kind of have a new ride of some sort with the change of this country and the nation. And now we have more interviews, the fifth group interview for NPC deputies. We earlier had Li Shufu, and he is the chairman of course, the Zhejiang GD Holding Group. That is a Chinese multinational automobile manufacturer, and probably the most famous takeover of GD is Volvo, and because GD owned the Swedish passenger car maker since 2010. Let's take a listen what he had to say earlier.
With Chinese Operation Daily, my question is for Mr. Li. In upgrading Chinese economies and pursuing high-quality growth, what the automobiles industry in China will do to move up the value chain? Thank you for your question. Talking about supply-side structural reform, this is a very important decision by the central government, and it charts the course for Chinese enterprises moving up the value chain. And it is also a very important part of our efforts to move up the value chain. The Chinese automotive industry is at the mid and lower end of the global value chain. So how to move up the value chain at the global level is a very important task facing us. So specifically, I think we're going to do the following work. First, we still have to cement our foundation and build on our core strengths by fostering key talents and R&D capacity. Globally, we have built some R&D and research centers in Ningbo and in Zhejiang province. We are also greatly developing our research capacity. Ningbo is a very important place where industries are moving up the value chain globally. Secondly, we have to foster new growth drivers and revamp the old drivers of the growth. By doing so, we can switch from the old drivers to the new drivers of the growth. Third, we have to make greater investments in the digital area. The 21st century is the era of technological transformation and commercial restructuring. So digital research and development is key. We have to revamp our systems of services and combine online and offline capabilities to develop our digital capacities. By doing so, we can provide both online and offline services and products to our customers. And our customers will be able to experience the digital, mobile experiences and products. Fourthly, we have to promote electrification of the vehicles, which is a very important trend here to stay. We plan to electrify 90% of the Geely vehicles by 2020. Fifthly, we will continue to promote globalization. In today's world, 50 to 60% of the components come from foreign countries. The share of the Chinese vehicles in the global market is very small. So how to make sure that we can achieve globalized development in which every one of us can share in the benefit is a very important question. And globalization is the key. We have to raise the share of the Chinese vehicles in the global market and increase the added value and branding value of our products in the global market. So all in all, everything we do aims to improve the experience of the customers and consumers. And what we're doing is to meet the growing and new demands of the consumers for better products. And we are also implementing the great decision of the supply side structural reform by offering better products in the automotive sector. We can only gain happiness through hard work, so we still have to persevere in our hard work to promote the better competitiveness of the Chinese automotive industry in the world.
That's a very ambitious car maker, Li Shufu, the chairperson of the Geely Automobile Holding Group. Obviously, he has a very ambitious plan for car manufacturing, electric cars, and globalized supply chain. But let's first cross over to our reporter, Tianwei, who is now standing by, because the NPC will have its final plenum for this year this morning. And Tianwei, you are now at the Great Hall of the People, the venue. What are the NPC deputies supposed to do in the morning? Who can they decide on?
Well, so yeah, good morning to you. I am on the second floor of the Great Hall of the People, waiting for the deputies to come in to the Great Hall of the People. A very full schedule of the morning, 7 documents they are going to vote on, and they're also going to hear 2 important speeches coming from top Chinese leaders. Let's talk about the 7 documents first. First of all is the government work report, followed by the draft of the national supervision law, as well as both the local and the central government budget plans. Those are 3 important documents. Followed by that will be the reports and the decisions made by the NPC Standing Committee and the work report by the NPC Standing Committee, together with the report of the People's Supreme Court and the report by People's Supreme Procuratorate. So after the 7 documents are being voted on by about 3,000 deputies of the National People's Congress for the first session of the 13th NPC, there's likely going to be the speech given by Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, that is going to attract most of the attention. As you may know, just a few days ago, President Xi Jinping has been voted unanimously into the office. That's certainly going to give him strong momentum for governance. And certainly there's also a strong lineup of top leaders in China already over the past few days. So people want to hear what is going to be the plan for China from now on. And followed by that, and to wrap up this morning's session of the NPC, will be a speech given by the Mr. Li Zhanshu, who is the chairman of the Standing Committee of the NPC. Of course, after all of this arrangement, there's also going to be a press conference given by the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, together with other vice premiers who were just elected and decided on yesterday. Zhou Yue.
And you mentioned President Xi will give a speech. Normally, it is just the top legislator will take the floor and give a speech. So what can we expect from President Xi himself? Is it going to be a thematic speech or just a prose-like speech?
We have learned that this is going to be a very significant speech. First of all, there are certain information and background we need to look at. This is the very first NPC right after China has decided to come into a new era. It's a socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era. Meanwhile, China has also decided that this is going to be a process of rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And this is also part of the process when China is fulfilling its Chinese dream. So you can see the great significance behind this. And also this year, the NPC has had the constitutional amendments the very first time in more than a decade. And it is going to see the transformation of the country's economy together with the task that China has to find its right position in the world because of the complicated and evolving international situation, including some of the bilateral relations such as that between China and the United States, which had got a lot of coverage over the past few days. And this is going to be an important one for President Xi because he's going to help us to understand how, together with all of his colleagues in the leadership, the three battles are likely to be fought, namely the battles against environmental pollution, the elimination of poverty, and also the battle against the risk in the financial sector. All of these need to be done. The tasks are daunting, and yet we have seen the 13th National People's Congress. At the conclusion of it, there's already a strong lineup of Chinese leadership, so people are looking forward to hear what could be the mandate and what would be the specific roadmap. And people also want leadership when it comes to the vision for the future at the critical juncture of China. Now, I'm standing on the second floor of the National People's Congress Conference Hall, which is the Great Hall of the People. The deputies are coming in. They're talking to one another in quite an enthusiastic way. So you can tell they feel very looking forward to this morning session. And certainly they have a lot of decisions to make for the morning. Back to you, Zoyue.
All right. Thank you so much, Tian Wei. Of course, we all look forward to what kind of a message the Chinese top leaders will have at the conclusion of the first session of the 13th NPC. Thank you, Tian Wei.
Thank you.
And earlier we heard some of the delegates speaking at the delegates corridor. Now let's take a look back of the background information of some of them. Among them, of course, Li Shufu. He just talked to the press about China's car manufacturing. Actually, Li started from scratch, beginning his career in the refrigerator manufacturing back in 1986. And then he moved on to motorcycle manufacturing 7 years later. And then he founded the Zhejiang Geely Holding Group in 1995. In 1997, he entered the automobile manufacturing with the vision of producing cars that ordinary people can afford. It's kind of a Chinese version of Ford. But Geely Holding Group's subsidiary Geely Auto became China's first private auto manufacturer. And Li worked his way all the way up from rags to riches, and now his company's total assets exceed 200 billion yuan, with more than 70,000 workers in his workshop. And Zhejiang Geely global expansion is eye-catching as well. The company reached an agreement with Ford to acquire Volvo in 2010, became the first Chinese multinational automotive group to do that. Geely acquired a large portion of stakes in Lotus Cars and Proton in 2017, and he purchased 9.7% stake in Daimler in February and became the German company's largest shareholder. Besides global expansion, Geely also eyes sustainability and green development. Geely has announced a Blue Geely initiative in which it aims to have 90% of its sales coming from new energy vehicles by 2020. And he mentioned all these information during the answering the question sessions. So it seems this car manufacturer, a private businessman, is very ambitious but also visionary, because he sees the car manufacturing as clean energy and as a global cooperation. What do you make of his ambition and the way that he wants the car manufacturing to go down the road?
We look at the cars, but an interesting thing to think about is when you think about industrialization, what are the most powerful symbols? Automobile, underground. Up in there, it's planes. In the sea, aircraft carriers. So as far as human history is concerned, very poureful three symbols. And
the most important engineering,
industrialization, engineering. And his story represents a story of learning process here in China. What is missing here is we need to think of the ecology that China has built so that our firms can continue to learn from the global system. Remember, when we start to produce cars, we forge a lot of joint ventures. To use the other word, FDI, joint ventures, is not 100% foreign-owned subsidiaries. This is a very powerful vehicle through which you have spillovers, learnings, both internally, because they are going to hire Chinese workers, and spill over externally, so that when you produce good quality cars, your competitors have to be in a competition. So it's through those internal and external spillovers, our own domestic firms get a better chance to climb up the global manufacturing.
So you're saying China's manufacturing can got the way it is now is because we learn from others first, and we become quick learners.
Quick learners. And trade, for instance, if you are getting into trade, because your clients are going to raise higher demands in terms of quality, and those feedbacks are very important for your group of engineers to design better quality to meet the demands of your clients. And it's a gradual, a continuous and the process. Now you see we have Geely, and my take of that is this firm does not grow out of blue. It grows in that kind of ecology, and as a continuation of that logic. Now it is very smart for Geely to move and to acquire some equity of those best quality car manufacturers like Daimler. Benz, so that it can continue to see that the firm continue to climb up those technology ladders. And it's very important. The firm is also considering to grow, but now it's not just grow, it's grow with a green consideration. The first step is to sort of move from sort of mechanical geared car into electric driven, and my personal observation is a electric driven car is a very important step for the ultimate rollout of automated cars.
But of course, the climbing up of the value chain of Chinese manufacturing will change the world economy. As a result, there might be some disputes and collisions with other major economies in the world. One of them is, of course, the China-U.S. economic relations. Now let's turn to CGTN America in D.C., and my colleague Mike is over there to talk about that. Mike?
Yes, so the annual two sessions capture the attention of many politicians and analysts here in the United States. China and the U.S. are two major economic powers, and they are deeply connected by benefits and common interests. The national legislature has approved a number of senior officials to handle China's economy. Roy Ruttenberg has more on the newly promoted Chinese official who has attracted a great deal of interest here in Washington.
A lot of talk about Liu He being named vice premier. Many analysts like that he speaks English, that he's Harvard educated, that he's understated, that he has Xi Jinping's ear, and that he'll likely push to rein in risk. Remember, he was just here in Washington earlier this month trying to resolve trade tensions between the U.S. and China.
And among the tensions Roy just referred to, of course, punitive tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. That set off a storm of lobbying here in Washington. Several retail groups are pleading with the White House to prevent a potential trade war. CGTN's Nathan King has more.
American trade associations really pushing the White House. I've got two letters here sent to me from American businesses. I counted 45 to 50 trade groups in just these two letters, all with one message. Mr. President, do not do this. The negative effects of tariffs on Chinese businesses will actually far outweigh the benefits. There are so many quotes in here. I'm going to read you one from the American Apparel and Footwear Association. Tariffs are a hidden tax on Americans, plain and simple. More than 41% of clothing, 72% of footwear, and 84% of travel goods sold in the U.S. are made in China. A tariff on these products would be a tax on every American. In addition to increasing costs for American families, this action could result in retaliatory tariffs that target American businesses, resulting in job losses. At the end of the day, this could be disastrous for American families and American businesses. Now, All this comes, as you know, as the U.S. president was focused very much on the trade deficit between the U.S. and China, which is about $375 billion a year. And despite advice from most economists and some of his own staff, he is fixated on getting this number down. It's a number he really looks at rather than other trade numbers. He has asked for tariffs. Apparently he was presented with $30 billion. He said that wasn't big enough. There could be tariffs of up to $60 billion. Now, American businesses complaining, obviously, about this. What about China? Well, China's sort of taking a wait-and-see attitude, as they've seen with the tariffs when it comes to steel. There has been a bit of listening to industry and then responding, exempting countries, for example. Maybe this will happen here. Maybe they'll get watered down. But China is warning that, basically saying, look, this is no way to conduct trade policy. We've got a problem. Let's sit down face-to-face and talk about it. If this does spread and there are more tariffs on Chinese goods, as well as there's talk of perhaps controlling visas for students, as well as cutting Chinese investment here in the US as well, it's difficult to see how China won't respond. They could do so from everything from Boeing aircraft to soybeans from Iowa. It would be a nasty trade fight indeed, and do none of the two world's biggest economies any good at all. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House in Washington, D.C.
And as the two sessions come to an end, China unveiled its new political leadership. The question now, will the political reshuffling present new opportunities to enhance China-U.S. relations? Joining me from New York is Robert Horvat, Vice Chair at Kissinger Associates. Let's begin there. Your thoughts on the restructuring and how it might impact the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world. And you know, one of the people on the list, you were talking to me about that earlier, of course, the Vice President.
Yes, Wang Qishan, who's now going to be the Vice President of China, is someone I've worked with for many years, since he was in Guangzhou, and then when he was Vice Premier, we dealt with economic issues, and now, of course, he's been on the Standing Committee. So he is someone who is very talented, very knowledgeable, knows the U.S. well, knows the trade scene very well, and I think is someone who will be instrumental in planning Chinese strategy and working with the U.S. Liu He, whom was mentioned a few moments ago, also an extraordinarily able person, a lot of experience. Both have great respect in this country, and I think they're the kind of interlocutors, the kind of people the United States will be and should be working with to try to resolve these issues without resorting to the sort of heavy-handed kind of policies that have been talked about over the last couple of months.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because the administration's opening salvos in what looks like a trade war. The Washington Post reporting this evening that the Trump administration is prepared to slap China with $60 billion worth of tariffs yearly. He could unveil that on Friday. Do you see this as escalating? I mean, where do you see this thing going?
Well, the Chinese so far have done a very good job of keeping their powder dry and keeping calm in the face of a lot of very tough rhetoric in this country. And I commend the Chinese leaders for doing this. On the other hand, if measures are taken that China regards as harmful to their economy and to their companies, then I think the Chinese will react. And a large-scale onslaught of tariffs by the president will certainly elicit a strong Chinese reaction. We don't know exactly what it will be, but they're certainly not going to sit still. And particularly if this trade issue becomes more expanded and it involves visas, involves investment, involves a whole range of other things, the Chinese are going to react in kind. That's not the kind of interaction we need. There are issues. There are a lot of issues. And I negotiated on many, and others did as well. But there's a process for working out these problems. It may not be perfect. They may not move as quickly as we want, but it's the right way to go, rather than all sorts of confrontations, which will not only undermine relations between the two countries, they will destabilize the global economy, since many other countries will be caught up in this.
And Robert, I was going to read one headline from one of the news magazines right here off the computer. Trump provokes China with a new Taiwan policy. It seems like there's been kind of the sledgehammer approach, and it's really interesting. We saw the Mar-a-Lago summit last year. We saw the State Visit Plus to Beijing. It seemed like the relationship was going well. What got it off the rails, do you think?
I find it very difficult to understand why this administration is taking such a viscerally negative view on a whole range of issues that relate to U.S.-China relations. First of all, we have to realize China is a big country and a consequential country in terms of our relationship and in terms of the global economy. There's virtually no major issue internationally that can be resolved without the U.S. and China working together, improving the trading system, dealing with financial issues. China was instrumental, along with the U.S., in helping the world get out of the 2008 financial crisis. A whole range of other issues, environmental issues, require the two countries to work together. Why this administration would choose this very heavy-handed approach at this point in particular, or ever, but particularly at this point, what's the point? I don't understand that. And it seems to me that if you think through, maybe you get a good headline the first day in some of the newspapers, but the second and third day and the months to follow can be very, very messy, and it'll hurt our economy. A lot of American companies benefit from trade with China. China invests in the United States, creates a lot of jobs here, wants to invest more, create more jobs here. Yeah. There are a lot of things, if you look at the consequences down the road, that should argue against taking this very heavy-handed approach.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us from New York and providing your analysis. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
American scholars and politicians closely monitoring China's political developments, and we'll provide more coverage and analysis from here after Premier Li appears at the session's closing press conference. But right now, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Mike, and your panel discussions. Let's have a little talk about how should China react. It seems to be like a cold roaster ride of China policy from the U.S. But the problem is, what is going to be China's response? Should China be calm and measured in the response, or should China send a strong message to the U.S. that don't mess around with us?
These are all rhetorics. The measures whatever we do should be measured. We need to recognize relationship between the two countries is so important, and to ask Americans to sit down and talk. Those trade issues are structural, long-term, and you cannot expect just one day or a few months or a few years to solve. We need to set this trade relationship and the China-U.S. relationship in general in the right direction. And what is the worst to happen is you get very emotional. I see the biggest two engines for the global economy in the 21st century. One is the continuation of China's industrialization, urbanization. The other is technology in the United States. It's by combining the advantage of the two countries together, then the global economy has a better future. Now remember, the growth here in China has contributed significantly to the growth of the global economy. In terms of growth rates, China has been in recent years contributing up to more than 30% of the growth of the world economy. Now, if we sort of backpedaling on those trends, that will be very negative in terms of the global economy.
But if you don't respond in any way, then the U.S. would consider that China is a weak partner and probably will come up with more tougher
Our policy should be measured. It's not that we won't respond, but the response we should do should be measured so that you also send a signal to the U.S. side such that we need to maintain the relationship. This is so critical.
And people are arguing which directions this relationship is going, because people are saying that now Trump is surrounded by, not by globalist, should I say, officials around him, probably more isolationist and protectionist, lower level officials. Will that mean that the Trump administration will go that way without turning their heads?
Probably. Of course, it's difficult to predict, but my take of that, we tend to be short-term. We just think the sort of rise of nationalism on the part of the United States is just a Trump phenomenon. Probably it will last longer because there are structural forces. As the two economies continue to converge, there are a lot of psychological adjustment to make on the part of the United States. immediately after the World War, the United States was so powerful with both economically, politically, and others. With those capacity, all else equal, the United States would be more generous. Now, with that convergence, it is reasonable to expect the United States to be more careful about their own assets. And China should take that positively, because for us to grow, it is under pressure that you grow. We still have 2 tasks to accomplish set by the Communist Party. One is to let the market play a decisive role. We have set up very competitive markets for goods and services. We are yet to set up markets for resources.
All right. We will continue our discussion throughout this morning. The last plenum of the first session of the 13th NPC is going to close very soon at the Great Hall of the People, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to give a keynote speech, and deputies are going to move on to the last agenda of the NPC session. We bring all those with our live coverage on CGTN. Stay with us throughout the morning. And also, this year's 2 session drew the attention of media, both domestic and foreign. And some of heads of foreign organizations also shared their views and perspectives on what has happened in Beijing.
China sends a message around the world that it remains committed not only to maintaining its markets open, but to actually furthering the openness of its market, which I think is very important for other countries to see that there is a future for globalization, and it will continue its process, and it will not be stopped by sort of other countries that seek to close borders.
The Chinese government made announcements in relation to increasing foreign investment, and that's something we support, and that's something we welcome, and I look forward to hearing more in relation to it. And I think these reforms, the opening up of the market, provides both China opportunity, and it provides an opportunity for us back here in the UK, and we're very much looking forward to debating and discussing that further whilst we're in China.
The Serbian government and I extend our congratulations to all the newly elected government officials. I hope that the Serbian Telecommunications Department could have more opportunities to cooperate with the newly established ministries and commissions and achieve more of our common goals. We welcome more Chinese companies to enter the Serbian market.
NPC is a representation of the vast majority of the people of China. It's a decision taken by the people who are represented, more than 2,000 delegates, of course from different backgrounds. So I'm sure the decision they are taking, for me, it's a decision which I believe is in the best interest of the people of China.
I think it's very important that China is putting these concepts into the constitution, ecological civilization, beautiful China, because at the end of the day what is said in the constitution is also impacting upon people's thinking and impacting upon how people are behaving. Adding to that, the Minister of Environment of China is drastically strengthened at the National People's Congress. They have been much bigger, including climate change and a number of other issues, and they have more power, and even a new name, which is the Minister of Ecology and Environment. So we are very, very pleased with this, and UN Environment, we really celebrate these great strides which China is taking for China itself, but also helping the rest of the world.
The idea or the initiatives of shared future for mankind is something that inspires us, actually, since we work towards not only just saving lives, but also changing lives from moving them from poverty, from hunger, into a bright and prosperous future. So we really are impressed with this initiatives of the shared future, and we hope that other countries also will follow suit on what the Chinese has recently launched.